welcome to the Queer Authors Table, everyone. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Today, this is episode 3, and today we have author Bailey G with her poetry book, Linear. And we have Tristan LaFerriere, he's got a manuscript, he's a new author, but he has not published yet, or it's not out yet, so we have nothing to show right now, but you're going to read from it, which is going to be awesome.
Yes.
Beautiful. So the first thing I ask people who are on the show, and I know, Tristan, this doesn't exactly apply to you, is why did you choose to self-publish? And I guess for Tristan, I would just ask you about the querying process so far, and I guess why you want to get traditionally published. So Bailey, would you like to start?
Okay, I have queried quite a bit since writing Linear. Even before I wrote it, I started querying, and I think I've queried over 300 people.
Okay.
No luck. So I just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna do it myself. I like to have the control anyway, so
all right, so you just decided to do it.
Yeah, I just went for it, and I wanted it to get done.
Yeah.
So
and this is your third book, correct?
Well, see, the thing is that I did originally write another one. However, that one didn't really go as I had planned, and wasn't getting the traction really that I had wanted to see. So what I did was I combined the poetry in that book and put it into Linear. So I guess now technically 2.
Oops, I'm muted. So, okay, I gotta stop. The camera is, for some reason, only wants to be on me. All right, I guess we're just gonna have to roll with this.
Okay.
So Bailey, I just wanted to ask you how the process was going so far. How do you enjoy self-publishing? Is it challenging?
I actually really enjoy it. I mean, I do really wish that I had, the whole team, like an agent and a publisher, and, the people because I did everything myself, right? Especially the promotion. The promotion is the hardest part. And it's very tiring and very overwhelming, and it gets very tedious. So the publishing part I can deal with, but it's the promotion part that's like, oh my God, like just buy my book.
Even when you get traditionally published, though, you're expected to pull a lot of the marketing weight. So you don't quite get out of it totally, no matter what you do. Like if you want to sell books, you have to put your both feet in.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
that's partially a reason why I chose to self-publish. But so you just, the publicity is definitely the hardest part. It's definitely tedious. It's a roller coaster of emotions, at least it was for me. And it's exhausting after a little while, to be honest.
Yeah.
You have to take breaks.
Yeah, I've taken a few breaks. This month I've challenged myself to write a poem every day. So I've written almost 30 poems this month.
Oh my God, good for you. It's for the NaNoWriMo?
Yeah.
Or just,
yes.
it just happened to correlate.
Well, yeah, there's no NaNoWriMo for poetry, I don't think. So I just kind of made up my own, my own NaNoWriMo for poetry.
Yeah, good for you.
But yeah, I do have to take, I just kind of, I don't really make rules for myself, like, oh, I have to write every day or whatever. I just kind of write when I feel it, which just happens to be all the time.
Yeah, I'm actually amazed because I write when I'm, feeling inspired and whatnot. And to write when I write poetry, it's very personal, intimate. There's a lot heavy emotion, right? And I couldn't imagine having that like 30 days of fresh inspiration. That's amazing, actually. Good for
Yeah,
you. Are any good?
well, I mean, I think they're all good, but I'm a bit biased, so.
That's true. Well, I'm sure they're wonderful. So Tristan, how about you? How's querying going?
It's daunting. I'll say I'm even though I've been writing for a very long time, I'm still very new to the publishing process. And as you asked, why did I decide to go with a traditional publisher as opposed to self-publishing? At least at first, it's because it's my first time really doing this, and people have asked me, people who are interested in writing or know that I'm a writer, they'll say, oh, how's the publishing process, like, how do you do that? I'm interested in doing that. And my answer is always, I'm as new to this as you probably are, because I spent so many years just in the writing aspect of it. I haven't even gotten this far. It's like a new level. So
Truer words have never been spoken, I
yeah,
swear.
my feeling of it was, I'm a little bit old school in that I was, when I was going to school and studying writing and studying literature and talking to professors of mine and friends of mine who were published, they had either gone the traditional route or were still sending out queries like I'm doing now. And self-publishing, at least when I started writing, was a very, very new thing, at least the way it is now, the way it's perceived now. So like I said, I'm sort of old school in that way, in that I kind of want to give it a shot, really. It's as simple as that. I had a teacher in high school who is now a published author, I think twice. I think she's released 2 books. And I remember she was in the process of sending out her manuscript when I was a student of hers, and this would have been about 14 years ago. So, and I remember her coming into class and saying, "Oh, I just got my 20th rejection," So now I can see, how true that is for new writers. Getting rejections isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's more of okay, it's another hump. It's like the more humps I get over, the closer I am to that goal. And not to sound discouraging, whether I reached it or not, I'm at least trying this process. I want to see if somebody big will pick up my story. The chance of that happening, why pass that up? That's the way I look at it. And I think, after a while, if I'm unsuccessful in that route, then I'm definitely going to go the self-publishing route. But I want to try this traditional way. I want to try to get an agent and shop it around and, just get my story out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And to each their own. That's what I was saying earlier. And everybody has their different path, their different route, like what feels right for them at the time. And if that's something that you want to try, no shade on that. That's your path. It's a dream, right?
Yes.
But it is good to know that for anybody out there, like whoever watches this, if you're trying to traditionally publish, every rejection you get should be looked at as, I'm getting closer to my acceptance. That's just as everyone's going to be rejected, and it has nothing to do with your work, how good it is, how good the story is, how the characters are, you as a writer. It's nothing personal. It could be, like I said, what way is the wind blowing? You know, that's the way that they're going to go that day. Maybe the next day they would have read your query letter and would have hated it. I mean, honestly, how human emotions go up and down, you know. But at the same time, you know, going back to Bailey, the 300, the big 300 there, you have to, I think people should have some sort of limit, you know, like, all right, how far am I going to go before I just decide to do something different, you know? So it's also good to have sort of a long-term plan in mind. So, but yeah, no wrong way. And yeah, Sylvia's right. She said she thinks the market for poetry is smaller, way smaller. Yeah. Unfortunately, I love poetry. I read a ton of poetry, and I write it as well. But unfortunately, it doesn't make the money these days. So
I think my limit, like you said, is more set at a time rather than a quantity of queries that have been sent out or rejections that have been received. I'm more about a time, so I'm thinking, you know, a year, possibly 2 years, if I'm still, you know, wow. That's sort of the way I'm looking at it, because, and I'll get into this when we talk further about my book, but you know, it's been years in the making. So I think that there's only, I don't believe that you should ever, you know, just say, oh, you know, I'm going to let this book go. But I do believe that there's a point where you have to say, I need to move on to write other things, you know, to expand my, you know, to expand my creativity. So there comes a point where you have to sort of make a decision, I think, on how you're going to close that chapter.
Yeah. 1 year, I think, is kind of normal, I think. Maybe 2 is even, I'm not sure. But a lot of people, you know, in their brain is telling them, publish this, get this published, you know. So it's hard, but bless you on your path, you know, on your journey. I wish you the best. I've heard great things about your book, and what I've read has been wonderful. So on that note, I guess let's get started. All right, so Tristan, what inspired you to write this story?
Well, I was, this goes back many years. I was a sophomore in high school. So this would have been in late 2008 when I was 16. And around that time, I was not out as a gay man yet. That came very soon after, but you know, it was my second year of high school, and this was, like I said, late 2008. Progressively, we were not where we are today at all. And even though it doesn't seem like that long ago, it was very much a long time ago for the LGBT community. So I was in a place where sort of a limbo, and you know, I had been in high school for about a year and a half, so I'm, you know, right in the middle of, you know, what they call the golden years of your youth, but you know, as some people find it, I absolutely use quotes very heavily on that one. And you know, I was struggling with coming to terms with who I was. I knew deep down, not even deep down at that point, I would say I knew I was gay, but I was not out to anyone. And I expressed myself through listening to music. There were certain bands that I listened to that really just spoke to me. I think most of it because I was in love with the lead singers, and so I became inspired by their words. I was very interested and involved in the emo counterculture at the time. So you know, I had dyed hair and, you know, wore the band shirts and primarily shopped at Hot Topic. You know, that was me at the time. And I found my comfort zone in that persona, and I had friends who also were very similar in that way. So in late 2008, I ended up going to see a band that I really loved at this venue out in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which sadly is no longer there. But that experience was so just amazing to me. And I actually was able to meet the lead singer of this band very kind of like a, you know, just very, I don't know how to describe it really. It was just like this chance that just, you know, I was very lucky in that I got to meet him after the show. And I felt in that moment very inspired by who I was coming to terms with who I was, and how I finally felt like I kind of found my people, my genre, my, you know, my group. And, you know, the culture was very, very heavy and fleshed out at the time. So I was really in this world where I wanted to write about how I was feeling. And so the first draft of what is now Black Haired Boy, I started writing when I was 16. So it was the end of 2008. And the first draft was so rough. It was essentially just an outline. And it's so different from what it is today, because the book then very much emphasized the subplot of this character, this teenage emo outcast character being obsessed with this culture, with this genre of music, and, you know, for trying to find his place and everything like that. But I ended up writing a very, like I said, a very rough draft that I still have to this day, and looking back at it now should really be just a lesson to everyone. When you finish your final draft, look back at the first draft and see how far you've come, because it is laughably bad.
Laughably.
Laughably bad. I mean, it's almost parody. So but having said that, I at any rate,
so it's based out of it's the you finding the authenticity of yourself, like who you are. That's such a powerful thing for queer people, when you finally find, because you kind of do feel like an outcast. At least I did feel like an outcast as a kid, you know, growing up, especially with puberty. You're like, well, all my friends are talking about boys, but I don't really feel the same things, you know, like what's that about, you know? And you had the same thing going on with you.
Yeah,
you know, but with girls, obviously. But
right.
so fine, that's such a powerful moment in queer people's personal histories, sometimes, not all the time, that yeah, it can inspire entire novels. It often does.
Yeah, and you know, I've since gone on to teach novel writing workshops. And when I try to plan like lessons or lectures on, you know, how to write a novel, the hardest, usually for me anyways, the hardest thing to teach is how do you come up with an idea. If you sit down and decide you want to write a novel, how do you even go about, like, how do I think of that? And there's really no answer.
Yeah.
So my only advice is think of something that you're very passionate about, whether it's an idea or an experience or a person or a place, and just magnify that times 1,000.
Like lean into your strengths, you know?
Yes. So just go off of that and expand it. Take it like DNA and just, you know, stretch it out as far as you can. So that's what Black Haired Boy became. It came from just this idea of, oh, I went to an emo concert. It's the mid 2000s, and I'm closeted gay, and I went to this show, and it was awesome. And I found, you know, I'm in high school, and that it was really a simple idea like that, and pulling that, and just pulling it and pulling it. And you know, I shelved the project for a while. I finished high school. I graduated in 2011. And I really didn't I didn't edit it or go back to it until that year when I started college. And then I started revisiting the story. And what was really interesting about this story for me, and I don't know if this comes to many writers, but because it took so long to develop the idea, and I shelved it, went back to it, shelved it, went back to it, is that when I started writing it, I was writing about current times. But by the time, I was in college and I went back to it and was revisiting this character and changing so many things about it, and it turned into much less about the music and the idea of this character Kieran being, obsessed with this band. It became more of a personal story, more about personal relationships, but also I was writing because the story has always taken place in that era from 2006 2007, which is when it takes place. That by the time I was writing these final drafts, it seems so long ago, and I'm like looking back and I'm like, wow, this is like different. This is so different because it's before there was this Facebook craze. It's at the time social media was just becoming a thing.
Yep.
Teens were using MySpace, but even then not everybody had it. It was, not Facebook was for college students, and we didn't have smartphones. It was right before smartphones, and this was in the middle of the Bush administration, so we hadn't even gotten to the the Obama era. So it was really interesting because I'm looking back and saying, yeah, and this is, the book takes place only 15 years ago, which doesn't seem that long, but then when I look, and I do a lot of research for the time period, I since then I only write about the past. I always have a very specific time period that I'm writing, whether it be the mid 2000s or even the books I'm working on now that take place in the early 90s. I always have a very specific time period so that I can research it, and thank goodness for YouTube, because I can literally go to a time period in a place and see what it looked like and see how it felt. And when I look back at 2006, which I remember very well, and to me it doesn't feel that long ago. When I look back at it, I'm like, man, like it's now to young readers, if they would be reading my book, it would be like me reading about the 80s.
Yeah.
and so it's very that was very eye-opening. So the story kind of matured with me. It grew up with me, and I think that's something that I feel fortunate in, that the character Kieran has been like a companion of mine for so many years. And he's 14 when the book starts, and it's been 13 years I've been working on the book. So it's like it's like a lifetime of working on this story and developing this character in this world. So I feel fortunate in that this is something I started when I was young, and now as I'm approaching 30, I'm sort of closing this chapter. So
Yeah.
that doesn't come to a lot of people, I think.
Not for me anyway. I had a hiccup in life. So, but anyway, so set up this scene that you're about to read. What should we know before you start reading?
Certainly. And there's some spoilers here, but I actually don't feel that. I think a good piece of literature, a spoiler won't matter, so I'm feeling confident in that I can talk about this. So
don't say anything you don't want to.
Right. No,
okay.
I'm not going to, and I feel fine, going as far as I am with this. But just a quick overview of the book. It's an epistolary novel, so it's written in journal entries, and this is, my character is Kieran Northrup. He's 14 years old, and he's living in a wealthy suburb of Pennsylvania, where he's just moved. And his parents are these very successful people. His older brother is this very popular athletic jock. Kieran is very outcast and emo, and keeps to himself and is very shy. And he's gone through some drama in the first few chapters that has made him even more introverted. With this move, he feels very isolated. And what happens is that early in the book, his brother Justin, who he has somewhat of a deteriorating relationship with, I would say. They're close, but they're starting to drift apart. Justin is killed in a car accident in one of the early chapters. So Kieran goes to even into a deeper depression and becomes even more isolated. But what happens is his high school pairs him up with another student in this program to sort of help him out psychologically, because they're very much reading into every little move he makes and assuming that he's grieving and that he could snap, that kind of thing. So he's paired up with this 16-year-old, so a junior, and his name is Izzy Marrero. So he's this Italian Jewish boy who's just moved to town from New Jersey, and with his dad, and he's also gone through some loss, and they've just gotten to know each other. This is actually the first day that they've met, but they've spent the entire afternoon together talking, and Kieran's finding that Izzy is very, very just kind of out of this world, outgoing, like almost unnaturally friendly, and it catches him off guard because he's not used to this kind of person, or this kind of friendship that already seems to be developing so quickly. And so in this scene, Kieran brings Izzy into his home. So Kieran and Izzy are in Kieran's room. You want to see it? Oh, no, Izzy said, shaking his head. You don't have to. No, I interrupted. It's okay, I'll show you. I walked over to the closet doors, parted them, and peered into the dark forest of clothes that separated us from that room that hadn't been touched in so long. You sure? Izzy was right behind me, and I could feel his breath on the back of my neck as I moved the hangers to make way. Yeah, come on. I yanked a row of hanging band shirts to the side and moved forward to what was once Justin's side. His colorful polo shirts, soccer uniforms, Nike sneakers, all still in the same place. The closed doors to his room beckoned to me. Once I opened them, we were greeted with darkness, as the blinds and curtains had been drawn in Justin's bedroom weeks ago. Almost no sign of the late afternoon light was able to seep through. I crossed the room and flicked on the ceiling fan light switch while Izzy stood in the closet doorway, looking around at the place like it was an exhibit, pieces of history behind glass that you weren't allowed to touch. If this exhibit had a plaque explaining its significance, I imagine it would describe in some way that what you were looking at was the bedroom of the late Justin Northrup. Short-lived king of Kings Valley, his domain preserved exactly the way it was when he was still alive, right down to the Hollister cologne bottle sitting on his dresser. Textbooks were still lying closed on his desk, where a framed and autographed photo of a soccer player sits up against a now slightly dusty gooseneck lamp. His laptop remained on the desk too, closed and the battery drained long ago. Well, I said, throwing my hands up, this was Justin's room. Izzy stayed in the doorway, like touching his feet to the carpet of the room would be toxic, but his eyes scanned the only bit of my brother that he would ever know. He was a big athlete, huh? He asked, eyeing the various soccer trophies displayed on the shelves high up on the wall. I nodded. Yeah. Izzy inched back into the closet just as light raindrops started to sound against the window pane. You don't have to show me this, he said, almost looking uncomfortable. I don't want to make you. No, I said, interrupting again. I want to be in here. I sat on the edge of Justin's bed. I could smell him in the unwashed sheets. It reminds me of him. Izzy slowly stepped in. It was starting to pour outside, and the white noise of the rain broke the uncomfortable silence as I imagined Izzy tried to figure out what to say or do in the bedroom of his new friend's deceased brother. Now that I look back at this afternoon, I probably made things pointlessly awkward bringing him in there. But still, he didn't complain. He just looked around like he was trying to get a feel for who my brother was, and after a few minutes, he sat down on the edge of the bed next to me. I'm sorry, buddy, Izzy said, and again he slipped his hand into mine, holding it tightly. I know you must miss him a lot. Yeah. I started to cry again, and it almost poetically coincided with the hard rain bouncing off the roof. You're so nice, I said. Just so nice. And I exploded into tears. Izzy hugged me tightly. I hugged him back and just let it all out. I cried and cried and cried while this boy, this beautiful, beautiful boy, held me as if I were his own brother. And here I had only known him for a few hours. Who was this angel? Who could ever be this kind to me? Who could ever be this kind to anyone? As Izzy broke the hug, he stared at me and gripped my hand even tighter to stop me from trembling. The rain was a monsoon now. Have you ever kissed a boy? He asked me. I shook my head and he started to cry too. In a weird way, I found his tears to be beautiful. You know how some people ugly cry? Izzy Beautiful cried. It was almost inhuman. No, I said. Have you? Yeah. We were quiet for a moment while he continued to stare at me. Do you want to kiss me? He asked. I nodded, and almost before I even made a move, his lips touched mine. For the first time in my entire life, I kissed a boy. Izzy's lips were soft, and he kissed me so gently and delicately that it took me by surprise. I was used to seeing people my age kissing furiously and so intensely, but my first kiss wasn't like that. I think it was probably so much better than that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, man. That freaking scene where you describe the room of Justin just kills me. It just says so much. I think a lot of people could relate with that. Very nice. So yeah, so I guess, should I start with a question?
Yes, please go. Yeah, please go ahead.
Or unless, okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, so you explained kind of already the answer to this kind of, but I just want to ask flat out, does it matter who, Kieran's the narrator, correct?
Yes.
So he's older and writing this in a journal somewhere.
Well, this is it's meant to be, he's writing them in the moment. So a bit of suspension of disbelief. And if I can say one thing that a couple of people have said to me, a journal entry a teenager is writing would never be this long. And I said, well, understood. I think there's a bit of suspension of disbelief in that, and that if I'm writing a novel, it's going to be written like a novel with dialogue. And I understand that many teenagers writing in a journal probably wouldn't be describing things the way a novelist would be. But I like to think of it as you pick up this student's journal that he was writing in the moment, in this time period when he was that age. So this is a 14-year-old, very well-read boy who is writing about his life as it is happening.
So I guess my question is, does Kieran have a specific audience that he's writing to, or is he literally just writing to himself, the reader? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because it brings up something about the novel as a whole. And it's something that I wasn't trying to do until I finished the book. And that was that in the first chapter, he sort of introduces himself to his journal, like he talks about, you know, I'm just writing because I need to express myself. I need a way to vent, that kind of thing. Because in the early chapters, you'll see that he's going through a lot of issues with figuring out himself, and this isolation that he's feeling that's becoming stronger and stronger. But by the time the novel's over, he's addressing a future reader, as in, if you're reading this, whoever you are, wherever you are, if it's 10, 20 years, 50 years, 100 years from now, you know, and he sort of directly speaks to the reader, and in his character arc, it kind of he goes from being the very fragile, shy, introverted child to the mentor who's addressing the audience directly. It's kind of comes in full circle, I would say, without giving too much away.
Yeah, and he comes to value himself, to think that what he writes might help another person. So
Yes.
there's self-love developing there.
Yes, it starts off as sort of a thing just for himself. He's venting, and by the end, it becomes more of a documentation to, you know, almost like a self-help in a way. Not, I don't want to say like, oh, a self-help book, but, you know, like something that just somebody would read and say, I'm not alone, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. When I was reading your passage, and I haven't read your book obviously because it's not even out. So
Right.
You know, when I was reading the passages, I read the other one you sent too. He sent one that was like 1,000 million words long, and I was like,
I should, yeah, read that way too quickly. I read 10,000 words. I'm like, well, that gives me plenty of.
Yeah, you could just insert novella into this show. But yeah, just reading the passage that you gave, I don't know, I got the sense in my head that he was writing a letter to somebody, and I was just really curious, like, oh shit, who? And like, does the reader become a character? And you know how some people do stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, yeah. It's all journal entries, and the reason that I decided to do that, because I think early on when I was writing like the early drafts, it wasn't like that. But I mean, it's practically unrecognizable in every aspect at this point. But I, over the years when I was in college, I read some amazing books that were in the epistolary format, as in they were written in either journal entries or written as letters. And there was something about that I found really intimate, because you really feel like the character's talking to you as a reader. And so I one of my favorite novels is by Lionel Shriver, We Need to Talk About Kevin, which is also a fantastic film. And the book is an epistolary novel, and it's really just, you really get sucked into that world. And the same with Stephen Chbosky, who wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is a big inspiration for me, and
Yes.
you know, in this genre. So
like American Beauty kind of has that vibe to it as well.
Yes.
And then Catcher in the Rye, definitely.
Right. So right. So one thing is, I don't like writing in third person. I've tried it, and it's very difficult for me to do that. I just don't feel a connection to my characters when I do that. So I've always done first person, but then when I actually wrote it in letter format or journal entry format, it felt even more intimate. So that's something that I developed after a while, and now I can't really imagine it being written any other way.
No, it works completely. And that's the first word that came to my mind, was intimate. Like, very first word, literally from the first two sentences. So yeah, awesome.
Thank you.
Bailey, did you have a question for him?
Yeah, so can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. So my question is, I mean, just hearing that kind of, it sounds like it brought up so many emotions. What was it like for you writing that? Did it bring up any emotions for you as you wrote that?
It did and it didn't, which sounds like I want to say yes, it was, so emotional, and I was crying while I was writing it, but I wasn't. I wasn't, because and this is something I wanted to talk about too, so I'll use this as kind of a, you know, a way to launch into that, but a launch pad into this. Kieran, a lot of people ask like, oh, is Kieran based on you? Like, are you? And the answer is not at all. I'm not. Kieran is very different from who I am, and you know, I grew up as an only child, so I did not have this loss of an older brother, and I, you know, while Kieran's relationship with this character is very intimate, obviously, as you can see in the scene, like when I was that age, I wasn't quite experiencing that yet. So there are a lot of emotions that I think that I expressed from maybe later experiences, not exactly like that, but I was really writing more of what I wanted to read when I was that age. I wanted to read about two gay teenagers having this intimate moment that I was not getting in really anything that I was reading. So I would say, if anything, the emotion that I was feeling when I wrote this, or the whole, you know, any of the emotional scenes in the book, which there are quite a few, are
As there
that.
should be.
What's that?
As there should be.
It's more of a, I'm kind of writing this frozen moment in time that it's weird, because I wanted to experience some of these moments, even though some of them are not happy. It's almost like this this necessary experience that I feel like a lot of gay teens, at least definitely back then, did not experience. May be different now. You know, I've seen a lot of progression and a lot more openness in, you know, two males or two females, especially with females. I think it's taken a little bit from at least what I see. It's taken a little bit longer for the idea of two males showing so much affection to each other to become so accepted, or to become so open. So, and I was reading a lot of that with female characters. I think there were some pieces of literature that had been written at the time that expressed that, not nearly as much as we have now, but I really didn't see it with male relationships. So with the emotion I'm feeling, you know, what's coming out of me when I was writing this was, man, I wish that like this is what I wanted to read back then.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to show, I wanted to see this representation of two young males having, you know, just a very close moment that while it's romantic, it's also more of a comfort. Like their first kiss isn't, it is romantic, but it's more of this like, I'm going to take care of you kind of moment.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a stigma with gay men that, you know, it's all about the sex, you know, and how many people they can, or how many guys they can sleep with or whatever. And to show a moment like this, especially having them as teenagers, to show them both vulnerable and open and both crying, which you just don't see that ever, you know, unless it's like they're making fun of him on the playground, you know.
Right.
But having this like this powerful moment where the emotions are justified and they're kind of nurturing each other, it's very much needed more. Like we need more of this. We need more representation like this, because there are a lot of people who are 14 and they're gay and they're male. And where are you going to learn that you're normal, you know, if you don't see it in your direct environment? If you don't have, you know, like a gay uncle or anything who's like open and out,
Right.
you know. I feel like that was not a thing until very recently.
Yes, I agree.
Like my in my last show, Cassandra York, the author, she's actually here right now. she said, like, we just made these crazy leaps and bounds in the LGBT community. Like, it seemed like it was overnight, and I'd never thought about it before, but she was so right. Like, when it was 2008, I was afraid of telling people I was gay unless I got to know them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've gotten into, I had all sorts of experiences. I don't need to go into it, but it just was not the environment, the culture that we're living in now. So
no, I actually, to go off of that, I last week I had the really great experience and pleasure of speaking at my old high school where I graduated, and
that's awesome.
My former English teacher, who I had when I was a sophomore. So when I started writing this book, he invited me, because we had reconnected online, and he invited me to come speak at their it's called SAGA Club, which is Sexuality and Gender Acceptance.
Good for you, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And when I was a student there, they did have this club, but it was, at the time, it was GSA, Gay Straight Alliance. And it's funny because back then, it's like, oh my God, like our school has a GSA, like how progressive, but also scandalous. And, you know, like it was so unheard of. But now, and I was talking to him, my former teacher, about this, and when I went there to speak, before I started talking, I was talking to him, and I said, I just find it so interesting how at the time that seemed so like such a leap, and like a wow, this is such a new thing. But now when I look back at the GSA, the Gay Straight Alliance, it's like, wow, how not progressive. Like, we're only saying gay straight. Now it's all about gender identity, and, you know, and asexuality, and just queer in general, and
transgender, and
yeah, absolutely. And so what I sat there, and he addressed his students who were in this club about, you know, who I was, and he had me read a scene, not this scene, but another emotional scene that I thought would resonate well with the teens. I had to be careful with what I chose, because the book really, despite it being a book about teenagers and what I hope teenagers will read and feel inspired by, really cannot be marketed as such, because it's not a young adult novel in its context. It's very, very real. And I'm not putting down YA literature at all, because it's my favorite genre, but a lot of the time it is censored because of who it's marketed for. And in this case, I did not censor Black-Haired Boy at all. I wanted it to be very real.
Good for you. So, yeah, I love that.
So it's more of a new adult fiction piece, which is where it's marketed for adults, but is teenage protagonist. But I read a scene that I thought would really resonate with young people today, and everyone was crying, and there were transgender students there. You know, there was a gay male student, there were lesbian students, there were also transgender students, and I was really just humbled to see their response to it, because I opened up with saying, you know, this scene takes place in November 2006, and half of them were just beginning to speak in 2006.
Yeah.
You know, because they're 15, you know, so that was interesting too, because I thought, wow, this is, for them, they're reading about a very different time period that they didn't really even experience. So I read the scene, and there were a lot of tears, and that was just so humbling, because I was seeing a whole new generation of young people taking in Kieran's story, which, you know, to me, I never really imagined it would move on to another generation.
So this book of poetry, linear.
Yes.
I did not read the whole thing yet, but I started to, and I definitely flipped around, and it's definitely hits hard with the mental illness themes, like hard.
Yes.
So what inspired you to write this?
So I mean, I experienced mental health issues, and I have for pretty much my entire life, since childhood. Um, and so I mean, I've loved writing since I was a child. Um, so, you know, as I've grown up, you know, experiencing different things in my, and just, you know, just all my experiences and, you know, going through therapy and learning to love myself and just different parts of my recovery. Um, so I wanted the linear to be about recovery, not so much focused on the mental illness aspect of it, but more about the recovery side and, you know, the finding happiness side of it. So that's where the inspiration came from.
That's super. But there's definitely poems of recovery in there, which I like. They're kind of interspersed with, it seems like the narrator was still struggling with some things in at least a few poems. And definitely the two poems you're about to read. Or which poems do you want to read right now? Because I definitely want you to read. Well, what do you want to read? I'll let you decide.
So I can read a poem. I can read two poems. One called My Run-In with a Giraffe, and another one called Cereal.
Perfect. Those were the ones I wanted you to read. All right.
Oh, sweet.
All right. So I don't know if we need any other setup for these poems. I think you could just go ahead and read. Do you want to read one and we'll talk about it a little and then we'll do the other one?
Sure.
All right. Perfect.
Okay, so this one is called My Run-In with a Giraffe. Nausea consumes my insides. The wooden giraffe I'm supposed to paint is staring me in the face, but I can't bring myself to do so. Have fun with it, says one part of me. The other parts of me are so consumed with anxiety. I sit face to face with this tiny wooden giraffe for what seems like hours, but it's probably only a matter of minutes. My stomach dancing the jitterbug. Giraffes are two colors and two colors only. My anxiety and OCD and wanting to have fun with it have all just met each other. The clock making this annoying ticking sound as if to remind me that every millisecond matters. I look for an accurate picture of a giraffe on Google and begin drawing. It has to look exactly like a giraffe. I color in the eyes, and I already screw up, but maybe I could fix it. I try to draw eyelashes, but that made it worse. My stomach continuing to dance around like Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer are in there. I try my hand at drawing the spots and forget about the monstrosity I've already created. The spots have to be done just right. But wait, my anxiety wants to know. Is it a Maasai giraffe? A reticulated giraffe? Because both have different spots. And I need to know which one it is. Never mind the fact that it's a wooden sculpture from a dollar store. I draw on spots and I stop, but not before I realize that my spots make the giraffe look like a map. Again, I stop. I feel nauseous and angry. The garbage can is looking pretty good right now. For the giraffe, not for me. Although that's not out of the question. I look into my garbage can, witnessing the depth, while still nauseous and anxious and angry. I forcefully toss the stupid wooden giraffe into the garbage. I feel better.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. That was awesome. I kind of get anxiety sometimes when I hear that. Which is good. You did your job. All right. Karen, did you want to start with a question or did you want me to start?
You called me Kieran.
Oh my God, I did.
See, our characters are inside us.
You don't seem like him though. You don't at all.
No, I'm not at all, but it's okay because I have screen names on certain like forums that's like Kieran's creator, and people just call me
Yes,
Kieran. So
you do on Twitter. I saw
I
that.
Kieran's creator. It's kind of like my thing now.
Your
But
fault. It's not my fault.
I know. Vivian, if I'm going to ask, and I apologize because my laptop is busted and I'm on my phone, it's not easy for me to access my questions. I don't know if
Oh,
you have them in the email chain
I
in
do
front of you.
actually.
Yeah, so if you would maybe be able to read the first one that I wrote.
Tristan asked, as you mentioned in your synopsis, Linear is a book of poetry based upon your own experiences with mental health and recovery. Is there a specific moment that you, as a writer, decided that you wanted to write about these experiences? I'm curious if your experiences and struggles inspired you to write, or if writing was already a hobby, which then became an outlet for you to express yourself and your feelings about mental illness and recovery.
I have been writing since I was a little girl. Actually, I didn't get into poetry until a few years ago. I used to write like short stories. Um, but as I've gotten older and experiencing more things, and with my mental illness, I knew I loved writing, so I just kind of decided to try my hand upon putting the two kind of together, and it just so happened that poetry was the easiest outlet for me. And yeah, it's kind of stuck, so it just kind of was coincidental.
Perfect. I love it when that happens, right? So that actually goes into another question of mine. So you naturally are drawn to poetry, and you find it's just works perfectly as an outlet. I totally understand that. A lot of people would, obviously. But what I want to know is what's your process in coming up with the poems? Like, is it totally intuitive and however you're feeling that goes on the page? Or do you feel something and then you recall it later and you're like, you know what, that was powerful and that was hard and I think that should be in the book, like how do you do that there?
It's it's weird because I couldn't write a poem like any hour of the day, and I can write a poem within less than 2 minutes. I've spit out a poem. So I think it's mostly intuitive. Whereas, I just kind of spit out onto the page how I'm feeling. And I also recall certain moments that I've experienced, years ago or what have you. But it takes me less than 5 minutes to construct a poem. Yeah.
And how about, so I'm just going to show your poem. So you can see how it's structured, and it's the lines, they're broken up at certain places like any normal poem. How do you come up with those breaks? Like, how do you know when to break, when to move on to the next line?
See, that's just honestly whatever sounds good. there's no special, magical way of me doing that. That's just kind of eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
So it's intuitive then.
Yeah.
You just do it because you feel like it. That's
pretty much, yeah.
So you're a natural then.
I mean, I would like to think so.
No, you are. If you're just doing it intuitively, you absolutely are. Shall I read another question from Tristan?
Sure.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so this is about the poem you just read, My Run-In with a Giraffe. So he says that it's certainly the poem that stuck with him the most. As someone who has experienced severe anxiety, I felt that you really accurately represented a chaotic feeling that can be associated with anxiety in this poem. He goes, did you intend to depict anxiety as a mentality that is impulsive? Because there almost appear to be like mood swings in the structure of the poem. And he's wondering if it's intentional to express it, like express anxiety as impulsive, and then the calming down, at the end. Was that intentional or was that just natural?
I mean, I wrote this while I was kind of having an anxiety attack. So it was all just naturally how I was feeling and how, going through the motions kind of thing. Yeah, so it was, and this is the stupid little cause of the
Oh my God, that's awesome that you have that.
this oh yeah, this is the cause of the poem. It's the
I
stupid
love
little
that.
giraffe.
So it was literally in the moment, and while you were feeling it, you just wrote down your thoughts.
Yes.
So that's pretty raw. That's
That's
why
like that's yeah. I was sorry. I was going to say that that's a great relic to have to go along with this poem. That's so it looks like you took it out of the trash.
Yes, I did. I felt bad.
and now you might be a little fond of it now.
Just a little bit.
Perfect. Let me see. I had a question about this poem as well. So I said in my run-in with a giraffe, it shows how mental illness can be a bully, how it can be super demanding and bossy. You know, how you go from giving yourself excuses and then basically bullying yourself. Like, I actually thought it was somebody else coming in and talking and saying, oh, but it's just two colors, this and that. I said it carries the same feeling and tone of having no purpose, like the purposelessness we feel in life sometimes. And I feel like the narrator is well aware. So at first you have the line, I sit face to face with this tiny wooden giraffe for what seems like hours, but is probably only a matter of minutes. And then later you say, the clock making this annoying ticking sound as if to remind me that every millisecond matters. It's like the narrator knows that there is value in time and in one's life. Like things should matter. And yet you get the distinct tone that, yeah, like while she's having anxiety about this giraffe, there's also this like overwhelming or like looming feeling of purposelessness and depression. And my question, I have a couple. Like the narrator knows that things should matter, that time should have value, that her life should have value, and yet she throws her opportunity to make any change into the garbage. And it's a relief to her, that it's gone. And my question is, what are you trying to say about giving up, and how does it relate to your experience with mental illness?
I don't know. I think, when it comes to mental illness, people like there's a stigma, obviously, a huge stigma that like people like to give up quickly, especially surrounding suicide and stuff like that. So I think with throwing the draft in the trash and all that kind of stuff, it's like throwing my opportunity away. It kind of, to me, kind of shows how depression and anxiety kind of make you do things that you don't necessarily want to do, I guess. Because they can make you do some pretty stupid things, where you're not fully aware of what you're doing, or you look back and it's like, oh my God, I actually did that. So it's just, I wanted to make the reader be aware of, like you said, every second matters, every millisecond matters, and what you do matters, and not to let depression, like you said, bully you into doing anything.
I think what you did really beautifully with that poem is expressed how, I've had my share of anxiety problems, with mental illness, and just how the not necessarily the stigma, but the misunderstanding or the misinterpretation of how minor a thing can trigger an anxiety attack or an episode, if you will. People think, everything's fine. What's making you so anxious? But in this case, this wooden giraffe, which is the most, I love how it is just the most innocent thing, and I totally get it. You beautifully captured that situation where something so innocent can trigger such a crippling moment for someone. It can be the smallest thing, and I think that was done very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. There is this sense of innocence that she's throwing away, and instead of trying to work on herself and value herself, she just throws it in the trash, and all the pressure is gone, and it seems like a relief. But I mean, as we know in real life, you took it out of the trash and now you love it, so it's like anxiety does make you do things you wouldn't normally do, and you can get anxiety. Like, I've had a panic attack. I wasn't even thinking about anything. Like, I was like in a car watching the road go by, and all of a sudden I started having a panic attack, and like nothing happened, but my brain was doing something. So yeah, something so innocent and seemingly mundane, and benign can trigger these things, and people definitely don't understand that people with mental illness, they don't really have a choice,
Right.
like do you have anything to say about that? Like,
I mean, I think you both just captured all my thoughts beautifully. I think people who experience mental illness, there's so much involved in having a mental illness that people obviously don't see, and it's very debilitating and very tiring. And like you said, the smallest, most mundane things can set off your anxiety or whatever it may be. And I don't know. I think you two just said everything beautifully.
I feel like people don't have any control over it.
Right.
And they can't explain it afterwards because it's unseen, we're still working on that. And I feel like in this country, we still have a long way to go.
I yeah, I'm sorry, not to ramble too much, but I really connect with this because going on 4 years ago now, I had a very, very bad time with anxiety to the point where it was difficult to function for a while. And so I really understand the crippling nature of anxiety, and it's something that for sure you do not understand until you experience it. Like you might think you understand it, but then when you really experience it, it's something that really it sticks with you, and it's and the healing process it takes a very, very long time, and for some people. And one thing that I found um with what you said, Vivian, is that we have a long way to go with the way that we treat and
It's shameful how
right.
long.
But I remember when I was going through this and how crippling it was. I kept saying, and I thankfully had was able to get professional help, but one of the things that I thought was I felt so horrible for people 100, not even 150, 30, 40, 50 years ago, who were not understood. And it's so heartbreaking and really terrifying. I lost my father 6 years ago. He passed away. And I mean, at the time, I thought that was the most difficult, part of my life that I had experienced. But I will tell you from personal experience that, and as sad as this is, I could probably deal with losing my father all over again more easily than I could with dealing with mental illness again. It is truly a terrifying thing. And I think that I really was able to understand this poem. Like I really, really felt a lot from this.
Yeah, I identified a lot of things in it as well. So I think it's very brave that you put it out there, and you're doing it because you don't want other people to feel weird, because that's how you feel, when you're going through it. You feel weird and different, and nobody understands you. And it's just, I'm happy you're doing what you're doing with your poetry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have time to read the other, or what's?
Honestly, my phone battery is really low, but I can try.
You can try. I'll let you try.
I'll try, but if I disappear in the middle of it, that means my phone like completely died. So
Okay.
I apologize. Okay.
That's fine. If it does happen, thank you so much, and I'll be in touch. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so this one is called Cereal. An empty menu board sits in front of me because I'm bad at making decisions. Somehow, I think if I stare at it long enough, it will fill itself in, but it's still blank. 7 days of choice. It's my worst nightmare. It's just meal planning, I tell myself as I pour my dinner of cereal into a bowl for the third night in a row. Cereal because I'm bad at making decisions, and dinner is one of them. Laundry, laying in bags, waiting to be washed, but I can't decide which day to do laundry because I'm bad at making decisions, and laundry is one of them. My wall filled with meal prep calendars and non-negotiables, which anxiety makes negotiable. Mantras of "you are a work in progress" and some baby pictures fill in the gaps on the wall. I still don't know what to have for dinner. I guess I'll have some cereal.
Thank you. And you're still here. Look at that. So I love this poem because just the multiple layers. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. It's the way I read into things, probably way too deeply than I should, but there's like this underlying, it's the same thing. Like as the last one, where on the surface it seems to be somebody struggling with this very, like making decisions, or with the giraffe, it was, getting it right, getting the giraffe right. But underneath, I just see like a whole other world of, I guess, themes going on, about where this person is at psychologically, and or like where you were at psychologically, when you wrote it. The one thing that I wanted to ask about this poem, you have all these lines, that are talking about the mundane, like, this is happening, I'm not good at making decisions, and then somehow blah, 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 blah. And then you have these two lines, and there's sort of like a vibe with them. Like, you're telling us why you're bad at making decisions, and you're giving us a couple of reasons why. And then you're also struggling with one. And then you have this line that says, mantras of "you are a work in progress" and some baby pictures fill gaps on the wall. Even in depression, like, your mind, you can't focus, like, you can't freaking focus to save your life. Yeah. And then to say you are a work in progress and mention baby pictures that are filling the gaps on the wall, it seems almost bitter, almost angry to me. Is that where you were coming from with that? Like, were you a little angry, or?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. The mantras of the "you are a work in progress" and the baby pictures was kind of, I wanted it to portray me looking back, and kind of reminding myself of like who I am, and some positive things during this difficult time of making decisions. But yeah, that's a very interesting way of looking at it.
There's something there where what I got was that, as a human, we are a work in progress. Mm-hmm. And even though you're looking at it with fondness because it's hanging on the wall, so it means something. It means something enough for it to hang on the wall. And yet you don't feel like you're being good at being a human, I guess, so I sense this like bitterness a little bit with those lines, because right after you say baby pictures fill the gaps on the wall, and that filling in the gaps on the wall brings up other shit for me too. You go right into, from that line, I still don't know what to have for dinner. I guess I'll have cereal. It's almost like you're just like, I'm done with this shit. Like right after the baby picture thing. And it totally stuck out to me.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I wanted to portray it, was like looking back and looking at, my self as a work in progress. And then, but I guess there is a little bit of anger there, like, oh, why am I like this kind of thing?
Yeah. And like work in progress. I know when I was struggling with issues, being told all these positive quotes, and they're all in the hospital and everything. And it made me a little angry at the time, it's just kind of like how is that going to help me? Like, of course, I was very cynical I was having a bad day, but that's what it kind of reminded me of. And like Cassandra said here, she said there's almost like a Chuck Palahniuk-esque sense of emptiness. Quote, "You are a work in progress," and baby pictures on the wall, like neither of them mean anything to you. They're just taking up space. It's like empty motivational stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the sense I was getting. Like,
Yeah.
It was excellent job.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I enjoyed digging into that thing and like picking out what's really going on here. I that's why I love poetry though. So
Yeah, that was, they were both very I think they both of these poems really represent the different poles of mental illness, because for me, my run-in with a giraffe is about anxiety and Serial is about depression. And for me anyways, personally, depression came with anxiety. It was sort of a direct after it was a direct effect of anxiety. So they it's sort of, I don't know if ironic is the word to use, but how they kind of beautifully play off of each other, even though it's a very crippling situation. But I really felt Serial too. It's just very sad is sort of a too simple of a word, but you know it's sad to read, which and I think a lot of people misinterpret depression as just being sad, and it's so much more than that. And this sort of routine that's hard to get away from reminded me a lot of Plath.
yeah. Yes, yes.
Yep, I've heard that before.
Yeah, like the symbology of the mundane as, deeper problems, like
Yeah.
using the mundane everyday household things. Yeah, and M Gallery said he likes thinking of cereal and cereal like cereal like can you guys see the chats?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
They pop up, but I did see that.
Gotcha. And then Cassandra says you did a good job of conveying resentment and cynicism. Yeah, it's like your lines were just so dry and there's an emptiness to them. And then there's this, just by the narrator looking at different things and thinking of different things, I was just brought into this like tumbling through this intricate emotional landscape personally. Yeah, your sense of, Cassandra says your sense of resignation is clear in Serial. And I absolutely, yeah, you're done. Like in that poem, that person is done.
Yeah.
Like they don't even want to help themselves anymore.
No, that was kind of my breaking point.
Damn, really?
Yeah, that was, I think I ended up in hospital shortly after that.
Oh my gosh. I am so sorry. Oh, I've been there, don't worry.
Yeah. So.
I mean, maybe is it a thing that all writers have mental problems?
I've heard that.
Yeah, or like
So,
alcoholism and
I don't know, I've heard that, so maybe.
I think we all have our moments and then, we have a journey in figuring out things afterwards,
Yeah. Yes.
So maybe we're just, as writers, we're just more open in sharing. So
I've often wondered that. A lot of people I know who write I don't have issues. I don't know how else to put it, but it's
Yeah, I've taken a few breaks. This month I've challenged myself to write a poem every day.
this is what I wanted to read back then.
yeah.
I wanted to show, I wanted to see this representation of two young males having, just a very close moment that while it's romantic, it's also more of a comfort. Like their first kiss isn't, it is romantic, but it's more of this like, I'm going to take care of you kind of moment.
And this is the stupid little cause of the
Oh my God, that's awesome that you have that.
this is the cause of the poem. It's the
I
stupid
love
little
that.
giraffe.